Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar, Selling Your Expertise, Simple Techniques for Maximizing Your Marketability. During this program, attorneys Craig Heidemann and Nathan Duncan will reveal a number of small steps experts can take to make strong impressions on lawyers and increase the likelihood that they will be retained to provide expert witness services. Given the large number of professionals competing for work as consulting and testifying experts, attorneys are looking for witnesses who stand out from the crowd. This webinar will offer helpful tips to help you distinguish yourself and your services. Topics will include how attorneys identify, evaluate, and select expert witnesses, how to prepare a CV and fee schedule that grabs an attorney's attention, how to conduct yourself in an interview with an attorney, and following up with the hiring attorney. The presenters for today's program are Craig Heidemann and Nathan Duncan. Craig is a shareholder at Douglas, Hahn & Heidemann PC. Craig's practice is limited to serious personal injury claims, wrongful death, class action, civil rights, pharmaceutical products liability, and felony and misdemeanor criminal defense. Throughout his practice, he has recovered significant dollar settlements and judgments for his clients. Nathan Duncan is an associate at Douglas, Hahn & Heidemann PC. Nathan attended law school at the University of Missouri, Columbia, where he earned his JD in 2007. Nathan is a member of the 30th Judicial Circuit Bar Association and the Missouri Bar. He is also admitted to practice before the U.S. District Court, Western District of Missouri. Our presenters have done their best to incorporate the questions that were submitted ahead of time into the presentation. We will take 2 question and answer breaks during the webinar. If you have a question, we ask that you use the chat or Q&A features, which are found on the right-hand side of the screen, to submit your question. We encourage all attendees to submit questions throughout the presentation. Tomorrow morning, I'll send out a link with the archived recording of this webinar, and we do ask that you take time to fill out the survey that will appear on your screen after the webinar is over. I'm now going to turn over today's program to our distinguished presenters, Craig Heidemann and Nathan Duncan. Craig and Nathan, the program is all yours.
Thanks, Matt, and thanks to our attendees for tuning in. It looks like we've got about 61 experts on the line, and we hope to make the time that we'll spend together meaningful for you as well as enjoyable.
We've got the presentation today broken down into 2 segments. The first one, we're going to talk about about 9 or 10 real easy, quick ways that you can increase your profitability. We're going to take a short Q&A session, and then we'll talk a little bit about how we as attorneys, and I think attorneys in general, go about selecting an expert witness.
By way of a little background, I think most of the experts, if not all, will acknowledge that they are, experts in a particular field of law rather than experts in marketing. And by knowing our limitations, I think that we can look for tips and tricks to help become better marketers, because there's a saying in the marketing industry, which is market or die. So without marketing, we really are limited in our ability to generate new revenue.
So one of the first ways that you can increase your marketability is by evaluating your image. And you have to look at, it takes a certain level of self-inflection, I guess, looking at what kind of an image you as an expert witness are projecting. When an attorney looks at you or the work you've done, what are their first impressions, and what kind of an expert do they know they're hiring?
And keep in mind, what we see when we look in the mirror is oftentimes very different than what other people would describe seeing when looking at us. So as you evaluate what kind of image you're projecting as an expert, consider having a colleague or a friend or a family member take a look at your website and your marketing materials and write down the first 9 things, 9 words that they would use to describe you and your work. And then ask a few other people to do that. And if you see some consistent words coming back, trustworthy, honest, loyal, you know that your marketing package is doing its job.
Well, and you can look at, to the business world, to trends that they use, things they use. Here on the presentation, thinking everybody would know who this is. This is the logo. This is Jerry West, and the logo that the NBA has of the man dribbling the basketball, the silhouette of the guy, It's Jerry West. I thought more people would get this. Craig did not know who that was.
For you skeptics on the line, I Googled it and did determine that Nathan's actually telling the truth.
He is the logo. So anyway, you might consider having something like a logo, but you can look to the corporate world for branding. Apple uses a very specific image of the apple. They have a consistent font on all their products. Things like that you look at and you can specifically identify their products with that company.
And not to get in too much about branding, I mean, perhaps having a mission statement, having an identity package for your consulting business where you're going to use the same font in your emails and in your correspondence. Your website is going to use some colors that might carry through into your logo. All of these things add an air of professionalism, of being established. I mean, we've gotten a lot of questions before the webinar started from new experts saying, how do I get ahead when I lack experience? Well, I think coming across as having a very professional image is one thing that you can do to give yourself an instant leg up.
Well, and consistency too. I can look at a certain document and know that that's from expert A. So you just need to decide who you are. The next way of marketing yourself and increasing your profitability is doing something we call a reach day. What's a reach day, Craig?
Well, a reach day is you might set aside one day a quarter. I think that would be reasonable for 4 times a year for you to get with your contacts, people that have used you in the last 12 to 24 months, or maybe you might target one quarter, people that have not come back to use you again in the last maybe 36 months. And make contact with them by mail, or even better, by telephone call. See how their practice is going. Let them know that you're still breathing. Let them know that you've got the availability to do additional work. See if they have any new cases that they might be able to use you on. Because we as lawyers, going to find an expert is not necessarily the first thing that we want to do. Hey, let's figure out a way to spend more money. We don't do that. But if we got a telephone call from one of our experts that we've used repeatedly, we might say, oh, that reminds me, I've got a case that I'd like to talk to you about. And that's an excellent way, zero overhead other than your telephone time, to generate additional business.
Plus we procrastinate. So if I get a call from an expert, I say, oh, dang it, I need an expert on this case. You called at a great time. Can you take a look at this?
And let me tell you, this is deceptively simple, folks. We've got experts that we use over and over and over again, and they never call us. I don't know why they don't. I mean, they should be picking up the phone. At least maybe we're not in the top 5 clients. Maybe that's the reason we're not getting the call. But pick up the phone and call your top clients and see if they've got more work for you.
All right, so that's the second simple way to make some more money. The third thing you have to understand is we as lawyers are cheap.
We really are. It doesn't matter how much money you think lawyers that you work for are making. We are cheap, some more so than others. So take advantage of that, at least acknowledge that. Give a little something for free, but tell us about it. Lawyers love to feel like they're getting value. Now, there are some lawyers that have more money than the Lord himself, but those are few and far between. Most of us are operating on limited budgets. We are taking cases on contingent fee. We might or might not prevail in the end, and so we are conscious as the case goes along about how much money we're spending.
Well, and we certainly can relate to the experts. Part of the reason you're in it is to make money. So you don't want to, give away what you're selling. At the same time, you can look for small ways in a case to add value that doesn't cost you anything or much time, but is a great value to the attorney.
Let's use an analogy. A lot of lawyers, if you see lawyer ads on TV, they're trying to get clients, and think of how successful their ads would be. Come see us. We have a great amount of experience. We look forward to achieving good results for you, and your first consultation will be $500. How many clients do you think personal injury attorneys would get if we advertised that way? Probably a lot less than we actually might find ourselves getting. Consider maybe saying, I'll take a look at your materials. I'll spend 10 minutes on it. I won't charge you, and I want to let you know up front that I'll look at your case in a very limited fashion for free and see how I might or might not be able to help you. I'm not saying that you should do that. I'm just saying it's one way to distinguish yourself from the competition.
All right. So we've all heard the saying, the early bird catches the worm. Now that applies to you as experts as well. You know, when Craig and I are looking for experts, we don't usually just call one person. We call a series of people, kind of put feelers out to see who would meet our needs. And, you know, one of the ways you can distinguish yourself is by responding quickly to returning phone calls, providing materials that we request, doing an evaluation of the case quickly, and by doing that, the likelihood of you being hired goes up exponentially.
Keep in mind, when an attorney calls you on the phone, and just last month, for instance, I had a medical negligence case and I needed a neurologist, and I got my TASA expert directory out and I started making calls. When those experts got a call from me, I was shopping. I wasn't calling just one expert, I was calling a number of experts. And I can tell you, some of them called me back quickly, some of them answered their own phone, some of them were able to tell me up front what their fee schedule was. Some of the experts had no idea what their fee schedule was and told me that some unknown staff member the following week would send me something out in the mail. I think you can draw your own conclusions on which ones are likely to be used, because the attention that an attorney gets during that initial call is representative of how you're going to treat them for the rest of the case.
And, you know, one of the other ways things you can do is, and I know there is some reluctance because you don't want to be confined to this once you make kind of a cost estimate, but if you can give the attorney who is working on a budget an idea generally of what you'd expect your services to cost at the end of the case, you know, that's something that would distinguish yourself from other experts who are reluctant to do that.
I mean, I'd say my perception of the pool of experts, a lot of them tend to say, here's what I charge. If you want to pay that, great. If not, thanks for calling. I mean, there's no effort to say, you know, but I'm willing to work with you, or what's your budget. Ask the attorneys what their budget is, and then you can give a more effective cost estimate. If they tell you, if you don't ask, you might not know that they've got a $20,000 budget for your services. So don't be afraid to ask what their budget is.
But, you know, that also depends on where you're at, you know, what your goals are as an expert. If you're not out there, Craig, looking for a ton of work, you can be more selective and you can hold strong on what, you know, you expect to be paid. If you're a younger expert or a less experienced expert, you know, then you could, you know, those are ways you can modify the budget and cost.
All right, websites. Everybody has one, and if you don't, you need one. But nothing is more of a turnoff than like a website from, you know, 2001 that's obviously not been updated. It's stale. It looks super old school. It's not fresh. I'm not saying that you have to have a flash-based website that sings and dances and offers to come wash your clothes. I just think it needs to be modern, and you need to keep the content fresh. For instance, if you're talking about your relevant cases, and the last relevant case that you report is from, you know, 2006, that tells me that you haven't done a lot of work in the last 5 years.
And look, you guys are experts as engineers, as nurses, as doctors, as traffic reconstructionists, and a lot of things. But if you're anything like me, you are not an expert web designer, and making sure that the web design looks professional will go a long way towards driving business to you.
If you're a neurologist and you feel that you can charge attorneys $500 to $750 an hour to consult, how much does it cost you to design your own website? You know, the answer speaks for itself, but yet there are some out there that have obviously done their own, and if they didn't do it themselves, they should be asking for their money back. So don't necessarily pick a web template off of GoDaddy and set up shop on the internet.
All right, another easy way, and you may be doing this depending on your profession, but is to develop your skills as a professional. You know, as lawyers, we're required to do continuing legal education. I know dentists and doctors have continuing education requirements. But if you'll set aside one day a month out of your schedule to do something, anything to develop your skills, that'll go a long way towards setting yourself apart.
And in order to make any of these work, you need to write. It is important to write down the goal that one day a month I'm going to do something to develop my skills, for instance, as a medico-legal expert or as an engineering expert. I'm going to go find out what's going on in the field and try and learn something about it or read an article about it. It just takes you one step further forward than you already are, and it shows your commitment, if not to others, then just to yourselves, that you're committed to this, and you're not just doing it to make, pocket change on the side.
Well, and here's another great idea. Craig thought of this, but you obviously are interested in improving your skills as an expert. If you want to learn about what lawyers do, you could attend continuing legal education courses in your area or webinars. They're all over the place. You don't just have to be a lawyer to go to those.
Sure, and I can think of 2 or 3 off the top of my head that we have in Missouri, which is, preparing the expert witness, or cross-examining the expert witness, or, finding the right expert witness. Log on to your State Bar Association website and get the schedule of CLE courses that the lawyers are going to, and go to the same CLEs that the lawyers are going to that relate to choosing and preparing expert witnesses.
Deposing expert witnesses.
If you want to know about a Daubert report, go to a lawyer CLE on Daubert, report writing, because it's out there, it's cheap, and you're going to be. I'll tell you, if there's anybody on the call today, we're up to almost 70 now. If anybody's ever done that, write in on the Q&A and tell me. I hazard to guess that nobody's ever done that.
Well, and I would tell the attorneys that you're talking to that you've done that, because if I hear from my expert that, hey, I understand Daubert, I went to the CLE, I understand exactly what it's about. That's a lot more attractive to me as a hired attorney.
All right, there we go. Develop your skills.
All right, Craig, how do we get some big repeat business?
Well, I'll tell you what, we sell maybe in blocks of time. One of our favorite experts, George Kirkham out of Georgia, he's a civil rights expert, and one of the things that he does is he sells blocks of time. I think he's up to $7,500 now, whether you use all or none of it, that's what he charges. And the only other fee that you're going to get from George is if he shows up for trial. He may also you may want to charge for 50 hours, give 5 free. I mean, if you can tell your hiring attorney that if you hire me, there's a discount in the future, that's something that's going to distinguish you from your competition. No one is doing that, at least nobody that I've called. In addition, if you've got business, clients that are coming back to you over and over and over again, offer them a discount. Say, thanks for your continued business. Your next case, I'm going to discount my fee, 10%, or I'm not going to charge you for an airplane ticket, or I'll get my own hotel room. I mean, these are just little things that make a difference. And it says that you value that business and you want to keep it. I mean, as an expert, you need to let your clients know, I value the fact that you're trusting me and your client is trusting me with perhaps one of the most significant events of their entire lives. Whether you're prosecuting or defending, I mean, it's the same way.
All right, so let's talk about displaying your objectivity and the results. I mean, so often you get experts that, and this is partly our fault as lawyers, I guess, on the follow-through, but we talk initially to experts, we get a report, and then that may be the last time we talk to an expert for a long time. There's a lot of value for lawyers where the expert is trying to stay involved and engaged in the case, and making a phone call every couple months, asking how's the case going, what can I do to help. It takes a 10-minute phone call, a 5-minute phone call. The lawyer knows that you're interested in the case, following through to make sure that it's still going well.
I'm going to give a real-world example of one of our experts that we used. He's a fire cause and origin expert, and we got him involved early in the case. We educated him about all of the aspects of the case. We brought him down and let him evaluate the equipment that caused the fire in question. He was a local expert, so he was able to drive and travel. We talked with him frequently on the phone. He billed at a very reasonable rate. We'll talk more about that later and use the same expert as an example. And he actually was able to give us a new theory of causation that we didn't already have. We had our own ideas about how the fire started, but he stayed with it. And he stayed with the case and kept following up with us all the way through settlement. And he now knows that this case that he was involved with, this theory of liability that he helped develop, allowed us to recover a very significant confidential settlement for our clients. And now when he goes to market himself, he's got a real-world example of how his objectivity, his attention to detail brought some significant pressure to bear on an opposing party that helped us achieve the result that we set out to achieve from the beginning. And without that expert, we wouldn't have been able to do it.
Well, and if I'm him and I'm the expert and I'm trying to drum up more business, I'm going to make sure that when I include my list of cases or on my resume or whatever I'm sending to the hiring attorney, I'm pointing out that on this case, I was involved till the very end. I helped come up with this theory, and I was able to get a favorable, help the attorneys get a favorable outcome for their clients.
Now, Nathan used the word there, drum up business, and some of you are squirming in your chairs right now. We're experts, we're scientists, we're objective. We don't drum up business. People come to us. Well, that may work just fantastic for you, but in the days of internet marketing, of the short attention span theater, I don't think that that's the current marketing model that should be used. I think it's okay to say, I need to go out and find more business, because, you know, there are clients and cases that just show up at your door, but those are becoming fewer and farther between each one. So I don't think you should be uncomfortable marketing yourselves. I don't think it decreases your objectivity is your objectivity, and that's what you're selling. But you have to let attorneys know how your objectivity has generated real-world results.
All right. Now, pro bono work. As lawyers, at least in Missouri, we're not mandated to do pro bono work, but we are supposed to do a certain amount of pro bono work every year.
And just so everybody, pro bono, of course, is work that we would do not for a reduced rate, but for free.
And I think, you know, that would be a strong tool to market yourself, the kind of quality, you know, it's more the type of person you are and the type of service you give to do one case a year for nothing, where you waive your fees. And you could pick, you know, it doesn't have to be a big case, it doesn't have to be, but, you know, you pick a case where you can make a difference to somebody's life, because, you know, we do a lot of plaintiff's work, and when we do that, I mean, the cost of the expert is ultimately passed along to the client. It says a lot to the client where an expert would waive that fee.
And if you think about that from a marketing point of view, there are entire businesses that market their greenness or the fact that they are, you know, fair trade. Why are they doing that? Do they really care about those issues? Sure, they do, but they want to attract the kind of client that cares about that wants to work with like-minded people that care and are out trying to make a difference. And you can have just a little tab on your website about your pro bono activities or your community involvement. Find a way to get involved and make a difference, and then identify that with yourself in a place that people can find, and that way I think you're going to generate more people that care about things that you care. You know,
it goes back to that identity package you were talking about at the beginning, Craig, that, you know, you're marketing yourself as much as you are, you know, the knowledge you have and your training and skill. You're marketing who you are, and, you know, where you get an attorney with similar values, they'll be much more inclined to hire.
All right, well, let's recap, and let's go over these one more time. Here's your takeaways for the first half before our Q&A. These are guaranteed ways to increase your profitability. First of all, take the time to evaluate your image and get some of your friends to look at your website, to look at your letterhead and see whether it's stale or fresh or whether they like it, and look at it critically yourself.
The next thing, make sure you dedicate a little time to reconnecting with your clients. You know, pick your top 5 clients. Any clients that you haven't talked to for a while, give them a call, go through your Rolodex, your contact list.
The theory in marketing is the quality of your success is going to be in large part determined by the quality of your relationships with your client. And if you treat your clients as fire and forget, you know, I do my work and I forget about them, you're not going to get the kind of repeat business, you're not going to get the positive word of mouth that all of us want.
You know, another way guaranteed way to increase your profitability is to find little ways to add value to the case, you know, but make sure you're letting the attorney know, look, I've done this at no charge, it's not a big deal, just wanted to help you out.
Well, and it doesn't have to be necessarily time, Nathan. Think about this. My favorite expert that I like to go to, you know what I've gotten from him from Christmas in the last 5 years, Nathan?
What's that?
Nothing. I haven't gotten a card from him. I haven't gotten a basket from him. I haven't gotten a bottle of wine. I haven't gotten a call. I've gotten nothing. And now I'm using him as an example in a webinar with, 68 other folks. So don't be a teaching moment for me. Send me something for Christmas.
All right. Make sure you're quick on the turnaround of getting your evaluations back, getting in touch with, now attorneys are notoriously bad about returning phone calls, but it says a lot if the expert is quick on getting back and is easily accessible.
And keep calling until you find out whether the attorney's gone and hired somebody else, because we may not have made our mind up. Don't give up. Keep calling. And distinguish yourself and tell me why I should hire you in a non-confusing fashion, because the confused mind always says no. Don't confuse your lawyers.
All right, and if you don't have one, get a website and make sure it looks good and keep it fresh. Keep the content updated, because after TASA sends us your contact information, we get in touch with you. The next thing we do is we go to the web and try and scope you out.
Keep it fresh, keep it relevant, include some of your articles on there, list of publications, your cases you've been in, who you are, what you like to do on the side, and some other things that we'll talk about later.
Make sure you stay on top of the cutting edge of your field, but also develop those legal skills that we talked about. Hit up a CLE or two and something that interests you and that's relevant to your practice.
All right, incentivize your whale clients, the ones that have paid you. Maybe it's your top 5 clients, the ones that have paid you $20,000 or more in the last 12 months. Incentivize them to come back, because if their success is continuing, then they're going to have a continuing need for your services. Don't forget to display your objectivity in a visible fashion, and do a little free work.
All right. Well, let's take a little break, do some Q&A. Let's see. Looks like David Pingator attended a CLE that addressed the older adult capacity declaration. So good for you.
I stand corrected. There's one out of 70 we're up to now. So that's 1/70th of the participants. that advice had absolutely no use for that gentleman. But
Charles Carter asked about whether if you're marketing yourself too much, if that creates a negative appearance, that would make an attorney reluctant to hire you.
Look, we're not talking about going out and putting your face on a billboard. We're not talking about TV or radio ads. We're talking about strategic marketing. I'd almost call it guerrilla marketing, where you're going to do a few very focused things to be successful. So I don't think that it in any way decreases your integrity as an expert to do the 9 things that we've suggested.
Well, and a lot of them really are most effective after you've already got a phone call or been contacted by a lawyer or have a relationship in place. The TASA is helping you, is driving business to you to get that initial phone call.
If you think about it, once you're in the TASA directory and the lawyers are going to, look at your qualifications and your location. I'm not going to pick an attorney or an expert in Timbuktu if I've got one within 200 miles of my office of equal qualifications. But once the attorney's made that initial decision on who to call, that's when the ball's in your court. It costs you nothing to be responsive, to be able to send out your own CV and not have to put it off for a week to have a staff member do it. So let's see if we've got another question here.
Stephen Butler asks if it's risky for an expert to lower his fee for one client, especially a repeat one.
I answer that question with a question: is it risky, not to adjust your fee and to get no business? And that's a difficult question to answer, but I think in the economy that we're in, and as more experts are entering the field, being willing to testify or to consult, you have to be able to say, here's the difference between me and the next guy. If you use me, I value you, and the more you use me, the more economical I become.
Well, and it depends how you use that or apply that discount would affect that. We talked about, you paid 50 hours, I give you 5 free. that's not, the person knows they're still on the hook for paying for the $50. That's one way of doing it. I mean, in our practice, we had an expert that we had used over and over and over again, and we had a smaller case that we didn't have much of a budget on. And I called the expert and said, hey, you know, this is a smaller case. We don't have the budget to pay you what we usually do. Would you take less on this case? And the expert did. Now, I have no expectation that the next time I call that I'm going to get that reduced rate, but I'm going to call that expert again, and I'm more than willing to pay the full price for the next time because he worked with me.
I mean, it's just a golden rule concept of treating others the way that you'd expect to be treated, and when it is apparent that an expert is not solely motivated by, you know, getting top dollar for every case, that's something that means a lot to us. And look, you know, we've used old George Kirkham as an example in many in many expert webinars. What kind of word-of-mouth advertising are we giving to other attorneys that are in need of his services? I mean, he's made an impression on us. So,
you know, I suppose a lower fee potentially. You know, that's a good point. Steve Butler says, doesn't a lower fee show bias? You know, I suppose in that case that would be an issue.
Well,
I've used this expert so much that he cut me a sweet deal.
I don't think it's a problem as long as you're not discounting your fee for defendants versus plaintiffs.
Right.
You know, that would obviously show some bias. But if you're willing to work with folks, I don't think you have to have a rock solid fee that never changes and somehow that makes you objective.
I mean, and if that's your policy is to give not just to Craig Heidemann and Nathan Duncan, I'm giving a discount, but I'm giving a discount to good customers just like anybody else. I mean, that's something that the jury or a judge, anybody would understand. They can relate to that.
All right. Well, those were great questions. I appreciate that.
All right. Should we move on?
All right. We're going to enter the next half of the webinar. We're going to talk now about how we as attorneys go about hiring experts and what we're looking for. And when we were first thinking about this topic, you know, the first thing I thought of was, you know, when I interviewed for my first job and how I went about to do it. Now, this young man looks like he's all anxious to go out and hit up the job market. Those same things that you did and I did and all of us did when we first got our job apply to this area. You know, how we get repeat business and improve our marketability as experts. Well, sure, it goes to your resume, your CV, that first contact, and how you handle yourself, and likewise the marketing skills and the knowledge and experience that you're bringing to the table.
All right, so these are the general steps that we go through as attorneys in hiring somebody. First, we identify a pool of potential experts that we would be interested in hiring.
Maybe 3, maybe 4, maybe 5.
It depends on the case.
I mean, and it also depends on the degree of specialization. I mean, if you're looking for a family practice expert, you're going to have to whittle through a larger variety of experts, you know, that TASA puts forth than if you're going after, you know, an expert on, you know, ammonium nitrate explosives or something like that.
After we identify this pool, we make initial contact, and after that, you know, it's like the old basketball team in high school are cutting the players you don't want, weed out who we decided not to hire.
You know, and why do we cut folks, Nathan? What comes to mind?
I mean, the first thing, you know, is it depends on, I mean, the big part is that first impression you make during that initial consultation.
And we have no reason to wait for more than 24 hours for a return call. So I think if you're going to hold yourself out as an expert, you need to be returning initial emails or phone calls within 24 hours at the very latest. And if you don't, I think it's not unreasonable to expect to be cut.
And then there's obviously some follow-up after that. So we'll walk through each of these steps and give you some hints on kind of what our thought process is and ways you can improve that. So our first step, when we identify, you know, we use TASA a lot of attorneys do. But, you know, every case is a little different. So when we're looking for an expert witness, we're trying to pair up the unique facts in that case to a specialty of an expert. I mean, you all know there's subspecialties within specialties.
And talking about following a case through to conclusion and being identified with a good victory or a good defense win, I know I stay in tune with what other attorneys in my area are doing. And if I need an expert on let's say a hog farm odor nuisance case, I know who the attorneys are that have had successful victories and defenses in those cases, and I'm going to call them and ask them perhaps what experts they used and who they can recommend. So having other attorneys that you work for ready to recommend you is important. And you know what? You know how to get a recommendation, ladies and gentlemen? Ask for it. So when you conclude your work with an attorney, you ask them, would you please recommend me if you have an opportunity to your colleagues? And then I'm going to do it, because if you don't ask for the recommendation, you can be assured you're not going to get it.
I can't think of an expert lately that's asked me at the end of a case. Even though there's several that I would recommend, I don't know that I've been asked to recommend them. So
if anybody has ever asked for a recommendation, chime in on the Q&A. I'd love to know about it.
All right. Now this is maybe a shallow thing, but it's important, and you'll understand. When we're making that identifying experts, we want to see your face. We want to know what you look like and know how you present yourself.
And don't show me a picture that your wife took with her point-and-shoot camera of you at the beach in Florida. I mean, and some experts have these home-generated snapshots. That's not what we want to see. Go to a photographer, give them $100, have them shoot an executive portrait of you. They'll come to your office and do it, and use that to market with.
We're looking for, I mean, in most cases, we're looking for somebody that looks like a college professor who's the sage of the area and knows exactly what he or she is talking about. So,
going backwards, Doug Emmerich has asked for a recommendation. Go, Doug.
All right, well done. And Chip Darius. So, all right, now this initial contact, we do this all, I mean, every contact I've had with an expert has been over the phone. But that's so 1995, I guess, Craig. we've got Skype and video conferencing and all this technology out there that lets me look you in the eye and have a face-to-face conversation, even if you're sitting in New York or Georgia or California, wherever. We should take advantage of that. So during that initial contact, though, Craig, what are you looking for when you're talking to the expert?
Well, I think I'm trying to get a feel for who they are as much as I am trying to get a feel for what they know, how they speak to me, the confidence that they give me in my case. If I call an expert up and he tells me right off the bat, hey, thanks for the summary of your case. I think it sucks, but let me work for you and I'll make it better. That's not what I want to hear. I really want to hear that expert say, look, here are the strengths and weaknesses of your case based on my initial impressions, and here's what I'd like to see to be able to tell you more, and I think I can help you improve your lot in life. I want the expert to convey to me that he can help me.
Exactly. Exactly. So, really, and when I get on the line with an expert, I want to hear a lot out of him personally. I'll explain the facts of the case and what's going on, but then I want to shut up and listen and really hear, how you're going to help me, things that you can add to the case. And I want to hear, at some point during the conversation, teach me something I didn't know. I've had a lot of times where I explain this is kind of what we're thinking on a case, and the expert will say, well, here's another way to think about it, another theory of liability or another defense theory that you might look into.
I mean, all too often I think that experts think that attorneys want to hear what they believe or perceive that they want to hear, and the expert's got to be able to step in and teach the medicine or teach the science or the physics that underlie the conclusions that the attorney thinks that he needs for his case, and then he can decide if they fit or not. And do it gently. Attorneys are a proud lot. They don't want to be made to feel like they're idiots, even though, in many cases we may be.
We are, yep. All right. And after the interview, there's always the exchange of documents and things. And we touched on this a little bit before about making sure you get those quickly. And these are things that we as attorneys would like to get from you. Your CV, your fee schedule, copies of any deposition transcripts you have.
And, as lawyers, there's a trend to write in plain English and not to use lawyerese or legalese, and I think the same thing should apply to experts. Your CV does not have to read like a medical treatise. And use a typeface that's legible. the Andantino script is not the best typeface for your CV because it's flowery and hard to read, although I know some that have used it. It needs to be a reasonable number of pages. Your fee schedule should be simple and straightforward, whatever it may be. And have prior cases and depositions updated and an update date. That tells me that you know what cases that you've testified in. We deposed one expert, and somebody else asked him, how many cases do you have? He had no idea. His answer was, I have a room full of cases. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Yeah, he asked, now is your CV up to date? I don't know. That's really impressive. And so he had to go back and, I still don't know. That case settled, luckily, but I to this day don't know if he ever fully updated that CV.
He reviewed a lot of cases, and he literally said, I have no idea how many cases I've worked on. I have a room full of files that I haven't even got to yet.
Yeah, I don't know how many cases I have open that I'm working on.
That was actually in deposition.
Not a good time to learn that, by the way. I mean, when I get a case, a summary of cases or a CV, I assume, I guess, at my own risk, that it is current, but make sure you do that.
And include some attorney references or other trade references saying, if you want to know more about me and how easy I am to get along with and how the quality of my work, call this attorney that's used me a couple times and get an opinion from somebody else. And you be prepared to say that on the telephone.
Chip asked about having a CV posted on the website, and I think some other people have asked that. I think that's a great idea. It makes it easily accessible. Just make sure you keep it updated.
Perhaps, an abbreviated CV even on the website where you're not giving it all away for free. If you've got tire kickers out there and they just want to see your CV, having to call you and giving you an opportunity to visit with them on the phone and let them know what you're all about is one argument for not putting the CV online. Ultimately, I think it's a personal preference, and there are strengths and weaknesses to both sides.
All right. Now, a lot of you have a lot of qualifications, a lot of experience, so your CVs are going to be long. When I get a CV, I've already made a lot of judgments based on the first page. So whatever your biggest guns are, your most important qualifications, the most impressive marketing tools, you want that to be on your first page. That's where your impact is.
And focus on the attorney's interest. We want to know about your education, your experience, and your certifications. An extensive list of every conference that you've ever attended, not so much. It used to be said on a resume, if you can't say it in one page, you better think twice about using two. Yet experts think that maybe a 6 or 7 page CV is okay. I don't know that it is.
It probably falls somewhere in the middle. Be very selective of what you're putting in there.
You can have the main CV and then say, if you need my references, I've got another reference sheet. If you need my list of publications, I've got another sheet. Some attorneys may not want all of the information that you can provide at the initial consultation stage.
And somebody had asked before the webinar about having a case-specific curriculum vitae. I think that you'd have your standard CV, and you could supplement that depending on the case with specific. You could point to specific. You talked about seminars that maybe you've attended, publications you've written, things like that would be more pointed towards the individual case. I think that would be very helpful.
And for the references too, if here are some. References in the area of A, references in the area of B. You could do it parenthetically at the end of the reference or, in list fashion. But that will help point the folks that are out there considering you to some opportunities to call and find out how successful you've been in the past.
Now, I came across this idea doing a little research about doing a video resume, and the link to the website is there. And Craig and I think this is a fantastic idea.
It needs to be professionally produced, and in addition to just briefly introducing yourself and saying, here I am, this is how serious I am about my vocation. You also have the ability to clip in excerpts from actual video depositions. Any attorney that you've worked for that has a video depo of you would be happy to share it, and you could send it out to be produced and just put in a couple clips of being asked a hard question and giving a very concise, objective answer. Showing that you've been through it before is a way to distinguish yourself from another expert who may or may not have a ton of deposition experience.
So, I mean, there's obviously the pros of the visual impact. It's something different. You can showcase how you present visually, how you present yourself visually, what you would look like to a juror.
Do you slouch? Do you mumble?
It would show, how professional you are in putting something together. Plus, some attorneys everybody has a different learning style. Some people are visual, other people auditory, but it's another way of conveying your message.
And as I age, I have to remind myself in my marketing efforts that you market to all ages, and the attorneys that are coming in, law schools are graduating attorneys at record rates, and so the attorneys that are hiring experts, by and large, are becoming younger. So keeping that in mind and deciding what the best way to reach them is or grab their attention is something not to be overlooked.
Now, that also relates to the potential cons of doing a video resume, though, is that there still are some of the old school lawyers out there that might think that they don't want to sit and watch you talk. They want to read through your resume and move on to the next thing. But there's also the risk that it could be your presentation could be a little too scripted.
If it were hokey or a little too used car salesman-like, it obviously has the ability to negatively impact your marketability, integrity, etc. So I think common sense is the touchstone here. Don't do anything that's too out there, and make sure you have some other folks review it before you release it to the world, lest you find yourself on YouTube.
Yep. All right, fee schedules, just like with the CV, I mean, they need to be clear, keep them concise. I don't want to do a whole lot of complex math and I'm trying to figure out how much it's going to cost me to hire you.
If you tell me that you will only stay at a 5-star hotel or above, that's not going to pique my interest in all of my cases. And some folks in their fee schedule tell me what their travel requirements are, and that may very well be your travel requirement, but maybe putting it in the initial fee schedule is a little off-putting sometimes.
All right, now this case history, we talked a little bit about the expert that didn't keep his updated. It'll take a little work on your part to do it, but you'll need to make sure you keep that updated. And looks like we have a little delay in the.
You're on the case history slide?
Yep.
Okay. But keeping your case history updated is important, and it doesn't take a lot of time to do it. I think that it's just one of those tasks, unpleasant as it may be, but I think having one up to date, ready to send out is important.
All right. On publications, a lot of times we get a list in the resumes you provide of just hundreds, in some cases, dozens and dozens of publications. But it's not always easy for lawyers to go get those. You might highlight the cases or the publications that are most relevant,
and use your complete titles. Okay, if there's a subtitle on your book that you wrote, include it. I'll use by way of example.
We've told this story before, but it's relevant.
An expert who on her CV listed that she wrote the book Welcome Silence, and that's great. Being thorough before a deposition, I told my staff to go find the book, and the actual title to the book was Welcome Silence, My Triumph Over Schizophrenia, and she was a psychiatrist, and I think conventional medical wisdom says that schizophrenia is incurable, but she apparently had discovered the cure, although no one else agreed that she'd found it, and the case settled shortly after that, and that came down to an incomplete title on a resume, on a publication list.
I guarantee the hiring lawyer in that case would have liked to have seen the complete title to that book before he hired her. So, publications. All right, we talked a little bit about cuts. The things we look at. Now, these are in no particular order.
No particular order, don't worry.
But price is obviously a factor. If I can get, all things being equal, I'm going to hire the less expensive expert. If your qualifications are similar, if your ability to present information is similar, I'm going to hire the cheaper guy.
And let's just talk about some basic things that may seem obvious, but just to remind you, running a law practice is a business, and there are few silk stocking law firms that can afford to hire an expert and pay them without regard to cash flow. But for the majority of lawyers that are litigating cases, cash flow is an issue, and it has nothing to do with your value. You may be a tremendously valuable expert who commands $1,000 an hour, and that's completely reasonable, but if 90% of the law firms can't cash flow the work that you're going to do, you might need to think about taking payments or not insisting on all your money up front. Or spreading it out over time after doing a credit application. I mean, these are all things that you can do to take price and make it not a factor.
But again, that relates to what you as an expert, what your goals are. So
be thinking about your questions as we approach the end of the top of the hour. We're going to do another Q&A. We've got a few in the lineup, but if you have any questions, type them in now.
We talked about how you perform during initial contact. That'll affect whether we decide to consider hiring you, whether we cut you from the running.
Just real quick, if you are going to call back quickly and you're in the middle of a sporting event or something that's noisy or the wind is blowing in the background, thank you for calling me back quickly, but please go somewhere quiet where we can have a conversation without distractions in the background, screaming children, things like that.
Sound like you've had a bad experience, Craig.
Just a thought, Nathan.
All right.
Not assigning any blame.
All right. And then obviously your individual qualifications play a role in whether we hire you or not. Now, when I was interviewing for jobs, my career advisor always told me, don't wait for them to call you. You call them and follow up after the interview. And that's a great idea for you as expert witnesses to do the same thing.
Lawyers put off the decision to pull the trigger on retaining the expert, and just because you're not getting called back doesn't mean that the need for the expert is evaporated. Continue to call or email at reasonable interviews, reasonable intervals, not anything that's going to justify a restraining order. But continue to call until you've found out that they've hired someone else or they no longer need you to think about it.
Well, that makes a huge difference. If I've got it narrowed down to 3 experts and I'm sitting, I've gotten busy and I hear from 1 or 2, I mean, that third who doesn't call me, I'm not going to hire them.
Sure, and think about the expert, the young expert that's new to the trade who says, how do I distinguish myself if I don't have the long list of cases? Well, be hungry. Show attentiveness. You can control how attentive you are to your prospective attorney clients and go the extra mile if you want the work.
All right. New experts. We have a question from Richard Neville about older experts as well, and I think we can address that after this. But, some of the challenges, the obvious challenges facing new experts are they may not have the litigation experience or, trade experience of older experts, and the references might be a little thin. So, Craig, if you were a new expert, how would you overcome those challenges?
Well, let's think about it. It doesn't matter whether I'm a new expert or an old expert. The coefficient of friction calculation for stopping distance remains the same, and my ability to explain it is either going to be better or worse than a competitor. My customer service is going to be better or worse than my competitor. So I think as long as it's not an opinion question that comes down to your learnedness, for lack of a better word, where it's truly a debatable issue, I don't know that being thin on experience, maybe thin on testifying experience might matter. Maybe you're gonna showcase yourself by saying, look, I've gone out and I've attended a college on how to survive a deposition because they have those, and I've tried to make myself. I've tried to posture myself to be as successful as possible. Those are things that are going to make a difference.
Well, some of the ways, maybe you don't have the experience and practice that an older expert does, but you can say, look, I've gone to this school. You can
always go back to the Harvard.
Right, exactly. If you do, there's no reason not to. You paid for that education. You might as well use it.
I graduated bottom of my class in Harvard.
But you might as well, they see that, an attorney sees that on the resume.
Nobody ever asks where you graduated in your class. If anybody's ever been asked where you graduated in your class, chime in. I'd like to know about it.
All right, we've talked about the money over and over again. Be aggressive. Don't be afraid to call the attorneys and say, show that you're willing to put in the work.
That's not going to come up at a deposition. Well, you're a professional expert. How many times did you call the attorney to get this business? That's never going to come up. What matters is whether you got the business or not.
That's right. Nobody's going to ask you that. And then the quality of the service you provide, it will not take long for that attorney to realize the quality that you provide and spread the word.
You've got to be able to articulate in 3 sentences how you're going to add value to the attorney's case. And if you can't do that, you need to consider what you need to do to be able to articulate what it is that you do and how you're going to add value to the case.
And if I'm an older expert, Craig, if I've got more experience, I'm going to beat that drum as hard as I can and say, look, I know there's younger guys out there, but I've been doing this a long time. And when I go into a courtroom, if there's a younger expert that's sitting on the other side, it's going to be very convincing. I think that's the way I market myself as an older expert is I've been doing this a long time and I've seen everything.
Sure, and you can also say if you're an older expert, I can get you the answer to your question in half the amount of time this young buck's going to take because he's going to have to go reinvent the wheel, and I've done this so many times, I'll be able to give the answer in a couple hours.
But if you can combine that, the experience you've had with the willingness and the knowledge to look at the newer, cutting edge stuff, having an up-to-date website and using the technology, I think that's the best of both worlds, and then you're really effective at marketing yourself to attorneys.
Well, and let me use another real-world example. There was an old expert that lawyers hate paying experts to go educate themselves on what they should already be educated about. And I hired a dental expert who billed me brutally for going to the dental school library to go read up on a condition that he represented himself to me to be an expert in, and then billed me for it. If you're a young expert and you need to get educated in order to be of value, you might say, you know what, I won't bill you for 3 hours of research time as I find out what the cutting edge developments are in this area of science. You might tell, and that accomplishes the freebie. It accomplishes the I'm young and I'm going to do it for you cheaper, and it counteracts the old expert saying that, I'm going to do it faster and less expensively.
Absolutely. All right, let's jump into a little Q&A. Actually, I skipped over that last thing, but somebody sent a question in, Craig, about whether if you're a less experienced expert, if it would be a good idea to host some kind of a presentation for personal injury lawyers. And, Craig and I both thought that was a good idea. It's a way to get your name out there and show that you know what you're talking about.
We are a lot of experts that come into town. There's a lot of nurses that are medical, legal. They do case review, and they'll come to our office and knock on the door, and they'll tell us that they're in business, just moved to town, etc. And that's one way to get your name out there. But I think bringing together a cross-section of the industry, lawyers, provide a dinner, let them know, what successes you've had during your presentation, how you work, how you bill, and make them have a good time and cultivate the relationship, because I think the relationship is important. I mean, how many attorneys are in each of your cities? How much would it cost you to send out an invitation to invite 100 of them out to a buffet? And what would you likely make in return? And I think the answer is also driven by the fact of how much of this work do you want. Do you want more work than you can do, or are you just looking to take 3 or 4 cases a year? If you're serious about doing it as a way to supplement your income or for a lifestyle change, you need to look at all of the available marketing avenues that are out there.
We talked, taking some of these questions, somebody asked how you could give an estimate on the first phone call, and it would be impossible to do that because you just frankly don't have enough information to do that. I think a good approach would be, look, I think I could give you, if you send me this information and give me 24 hours, I can give you a rough estimate of what it's going to cost you to retain me in this case.
If you think about that, and let's say it's a medical negligence case, and you're going to be asked to testify for the prosecution or the defense, and hey, would you send me the advent note, the operative report, and the discharge diagnosis? How long is it going to take you to review that? 15 minutes? You know, you get it faxed in, you review it, you give a rough opinion on negligence for or against, and then you give an estimate on how much to write an expert report or a Rule 26 report. You're head and shoulders above the competition right now because you haven't charged anybody to look at those documents.
Ron asked if there's a problem with having too low a fee. Craig, what do you think?
It's never too low.
Well, I mean, from a trial point of view, you know, if you have a low fee, I don't know if the jury is really going to put together I guess it's possible. Somebody might say, well, if yours is so low, why is, you know, maybe you're not worth that much. But I think it's more, the tendency would be to say, well, why is the other guy charging so much?
Well, look, I mean, we could do a whole webinar on setting your fee.
I think we have.
You don't want to charge the defense more than the plaintiff. That's happened in certain cases. You don't want to appear too cheap. You don't want to appear too expensive. All of those extremes affect your credibility in a large or small way. So be governed by what your peers are doing.
Let's see. You know, Stephen Butler asks, how should you market yourself if you're booked for 3 to 6 months? You know, I think if you're still looking for business, you know, you need to be upfront about that and say, look, I'd love to help you with your case, but I'm going to be 3 to 6 months before I can get to it. Then the attorney knows that, you know, that's what the problem, that's going to be the situation, and can make other arrangements. The big mistake would be to try and take it on, and try and juggle the two cases or the multiple cases you have going.
Now, here's, you know, Chip Darius says he'd be more comfortable making a donation in the name of retaining counsel to feed the children or the Haiti earthquake relief. What about saying I'll give 5% of any fees of my cases during the month of so-and-so to one of those causes? That might be another interesting idea. Thanks, Chip, for that, for you know, not necessarily having to take on a case for free, but to contributing to a worthy cause. Chip's also concerned about my Christmas present idea. I think that sending out Christmas gifts, as long as you're not sending me a shotgun or a car, sending me a little token at Christmas time to let me know that you appreciate my business is not going to impact your credibility.
Although, you know, I mean, they're probably not going to come up at deposition or trial, but I might add that to my list of questions to ask extra witnesses now. That's a valid concern.
I still want my Christmas gift.
Craig wants his shotgun, apparently.
No, not just a little basket of chocolate or a fruitcake.
Scott wanted to know how to handle an attorney that sends 8 inches of documents and then gets angry about the invoice. You know, we covered this in another webinar we gave, but, you know, the key on these fee issues is just to be upfront. Let the attorney, you know, before you dive in and start doing the work reviewing those, call the attorney and say, look, you send me 8 inches of stuff. You know, I'm going to charge you $300 an hour to look through it. It's probably going to take you.
Look, a lot of that is laziness on the part of the attorney. When you get it in, before you dig into it, call them and communicate and say, look, you can spend your time whittling this down, but if you want me to look at it, I estimate it's going to take this amount of time, so don't be surprised when you get the bill. Avoid surprises, and that's half the key to success. I think we've run over just a little bit today, but we've had some great questions. I hope this information is relevant and timely. And we really enjoyed putting this one together, and I hope that you guys can at least implement one thing. If you can implement one idea that you've heard today that might fit into your particular practice area, I think that you're going to be head and shoulders ahead of the game, or ahead of the competition.
Thanks for attending.
Appreciate it.
Matt, back to you.
Thank you, Craig and Nathan, for another great presentation. It shows that you guys put a lot of time and effort into this, so thank you very much. And thank you to all the experts who attended. I hope you guys were able to take some good information away from this webinar and apply it to your practice. I'll be sending out a link to the archived recording of this webinar tomorrow morning. I'll also send out a copy of the PowerPoint that was used by our presenters. If you have any questions or comments, Please feel free to email me at mhyde@tasanet.com. I just put it up on the screen. We do take all the comments and apply them to all of our webinars and try to make them better through the constructive comments. And we also are going to post a survey on your screen after you leave the meeting. Please take a moment or two to fill out that survey. Our presenters do appreciate the feedback. Other than that, we hope to see you at future TASA events. And again, thank you, everybody, for your time. I'm now going to end the meeting.